بشنو از نی چون حکایت می کند، از جدایی شکایت می کند. که از نیستن چون مرا ببریده اند، از نفیرم مرد و زن نالیده اند. Listen to the song of the reed in its weeping, for it tells the story of our separation. For since the day the reed was torn from the riverbank, in its sorrow is heard the cry of every man, of every woman. In Bokhara, city of copper, in Bokhara, city of merchants and scholars, in Bokhara, city of good fortune, there was a prince called Sadr-e-Jahan, prince of the world, and he had in his service a Vakil, a minister who offered him many, many years of faithful service. But in a moment of doubt, the Vakil betrayed his prince. And when the prince heard of this betrayal, his heart became so enraged, that he placed a ransom on the head of his beloved Vakil, his beloved minister. And so the Vakil had no other choice but to run away to faraway Khorasan. And there is where he lived 10 long years of exile. But with each passing year of exile, his heart became heavier and heavier with homesickness. Until at the end of the 10 years, he gathered all his Khorasani friends around him, and he spoke to them in this way. Dustanam, my dear friends, all these years you have offered me your hospitality, your very hearts, and yet all this has not consoled me from my homesickness. Consoled me from my homesickness for my beloved Bokhara. And so today I tell you all that I must leave you. I must leave you, or otherwise my heart will be broken beyond repair if I stay here any longer, despite all your kindness. Well, when his Khorasani friends heard this, they began to cry out, Dustam, my friend, have you lost your mind? Don't you understand that that terrible ransom is still on your head? If you return to Bokhara now, surely you will die. But to this the Vakil replied, either I will die at the hands of my prince, or I will die from homesickness, remaining here, far away from Bokhara. I leave to fate what death it chooses for me. And without a further word, the Vakil left his Khorasani friends and began his long journey home. But it didn't take long. It didn't take long for his doubts to catch up with him. And around the time that this happened, on his journey he came upon the house of a farmer and his wife. And as the sun was setting, the farmer offered him a place to stay that night under his own roof. But that night the Vakil did not have a moment's sleep. He tossed and turned in bed, tormenting himself with his doubts. What am I doing? Perhaps my Khorasani friends are right. Why am I returning now? Am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? What am I supposed to do? And all night it was like this. But the next morning, when the Vakil left the house of the farmer and walked out into the front yard, there he saw the farmer's wife cooking something in a pot over an open fire. She had a wooden ladle with which she stirred the pot. And as she did so, she talked in a very strange way. For with each stir she said this, my dear ones, I love you more than you will ever know. My dear ones, I love you more than you will ever know. Well, the Vakil was intrigued at this strange language, intrigued that the farmer's wife was talking to her own cooking pot. And so she approached her, saying this, Khanum, my dear lady, how strangely you speak with your cooking pot. Surely there is a reason for this. And the farmer's wife turned to the Vakil and said this, Aga, sir, the reason why I speak this way, for in my cooking pot I am cooking my beloved chickpeas. And as I cook my chickpeas, I hear from within the pot the chickpeas cry out, what are you doing to us? You chose us from the finest things in the market. And for what? To throw us into this boiling water? To set fire to us? What are you doing to us? And so you see, dear sir, I'm trying to explain to my chickpeas that when they were green and raw, they could not know their own true flavor. It is only in this boiling water, only in this fire that they can once and for all discover their true savor, that they once and for all can discover their true nature. Well, at that moment, the Vakil's courage returned to him, and he left the farmer and his wife and continued on his long journey. And after some days' travel, he arrived in a town. Now, by the time he arrived in that town, the sun was already setting, and it was just the time for evening prayers. And the Vakil, on his long journey, had a hunger within his heart for prayer. So he made his way to the masjid, to the mosque in that town. But as he entered the courtyard, he saw that he was the only one there. Well, he found this all very strange. He saw someone pass him by on the street, and he cried out, Aga, sir, what is wrong with your town? Does no one go to the mosque for evening prayers here? And the passerby turned to the Vakil and said this, Aga, sir, indeed you are a newcomer to this town. For if you were not, you would know full well that our mosque every night is infested with the jinn folk. They do not let a single son of Adam pass through the doors of that mosque. And if anyone dares do so, they will pay for it with their life. Well, the Vakil only shrugged his shoulders at these words and made his way towards the entrance of the mosque. But the other man ran after him, tugged on his sleeve, and called other townspeople to come, and before the Vakil knew it, he had practically all the town tugging at his sleeve. Aga, sir, they pleaded, please stop. Why are you encouraging this unnecessary bloodshed? Surely if you go in there, you will perish at the hands of the jinn folk. But the Vakil only turned to all the people who were gathered there and said this, either I will lose my life at the hands of my prince, or I will lose my life at the hands of the jinn folk that await me in this mosque tonight. I leave to fate what death it chooses for me." And without a further word, the Vakil entered the mosque, all alone. Now when he entered the mosque, he found himself under the azure blue dome above. And from that azure blue dome there hung a large lamp that was surrounded by small lanterns, like fireflies around a big fire. And underneath that large lamp, the Vakil found a prayer mat, and he fell to his knees on that very mat and began to utter the first words of salat, the first words of prayer. He had uttered but a few first words of his first prayer, and then he heard it, the rattling of that lamp above. It rattled, and from it came a voice so deep it sounded like it came from the bottom of a barrel. "How dare you? How dare you enter the realm of the jinn folk, O son of Adam?" The Vakil's heart began to race. He felt the fear climb up his throat, but somehow he mustered the courage to look up at that lamp, and he cried out, All right, take me now. Take me now if you wish, for who are you after all but the shadow of a lie? The shadow of a lie behind which the drum beats out its empty fears. Who are you after all but the shadow of a lie behind which the drum beats out its empty fears? Once he said these words, the lamp began to shake and shake and shake until it burst. And from it there fell countless gold dinars. Before he knew it, covering all the floor of the mosque, were piles and piles of gold coins. And he took among those gold coins the amount that was equal to the ransom that was placed on his head. And he left the rest that was gathered there on the floor. Now the next morning the townspeople came to their mosque for the morning prayers, filled with dread, for they expected to see the remains of that poor, unfortunate stranger who dared to defy the jinn folk the night before. But when they entered the mosque, how amazed they were to see not only that the Vakil was alive, but that he was surrounded by piles and piles of countless gold coins. And the Vakil smiled to them. "Good people," he said to them, "all the riches you see here is my gift to you." "No," cried the townspeople in amazement. No, we could not accept such a rich gift." The Vakil smiled back at them, saying this, "Good people, please, take all these riches, for what are they, after all, but a small token of my appreciation for your hospitality." And so the Vakil left that town and continued on his journey. And after some days' travel, he found himself passing through the gates of the great city of Bokhara, home. And once he was within the city, it didn't take long. It didn't take long for him to be recognized. Soon one person came in another, and they started whispering in his ear, "Have you lost your mind? Don't you understand that ransom is still on your head? Leave at once, and we won't say a word. Please don't risk your life for nothing." But the Vakil turned to all those concerned townspeople who surround him in his hometown, He turned to all them and saying this, "If my prince wants my life, so be it. For either I will die at the hands of my prince, or I will die never having to see his face ever again. I leave to fate what death it chooses for me. For if indeed our prince wants my blood, then may my body be a well where he can find it. For I am like the water that is seeking the one who is thirsty for it." And then the Vakil left all those people, all those concerned people who had gathered in the street, and he made his way to the palace of the prince. And before he knew it, he was led through the doors into the throne room of the prince. Now on that day the prince was sitting on his golden throne, and he was holding his assembly, his divan where were gathered all the ambassadors from Rum and China. And there was the Vakil walking towards the golden throne of his prince. And behind his back, he heard the ambassadors and courtiers whispering among themselves, "Has he lost his mind? Doesn't he understand that that ransom is still on his head? Has he lost his mind?" But the Vakil did not hear all the whisperings that were going on behind his back. He walked straight towards the golden throne of his prince, until he found himself at a respectable distance. And he placed before him all those gold coins that he had collected that were equal to the ransom that had been placed on his head. And he placed it there on the floor. And behind it, there is where he chose to kneel and bow. And he bowed down, his head looking to the floor, saying these words, "Your Majesty, Your Majesty, I come here today with an amount equal to the ransom you placed on my head. And behind this money, I come here, placing my own head. I leave to you which of the two you will choose today." And then he bowed down, not daring to stir from that place. Oh, there was a terrible silence. But then after, he heard footsteps approach him. And then he felt a pair of arms reach for his, motioning him to stand up. And when he stood up, he looked right into the eyes of his prince. And the prince looked back at him, smiling at him. "Vakil," he said, "O my beloved minister, you will return to my favor today. For coming here today, overcoming all your doubts, all your fears, coming here today despite all this, today you have shown me more love than in all the faithful years of service you offered me before. And it is for this reason that you have returned to my favor today, and you will serve here as you have before." Well, at first the Vakil could not believe what he was hearing. And then he felt a lightness, as if years of fear and doubt had suddenly been removed from his shoulders. And this freedom made his heart burst with joy. And he began to weep before his prince, saying this, "Your Majesty, Your Majesty, after all that has happened, After all the joy I feel now that I have returned to you, with all this I am confused. I am confused, for I do not know which is the sweeter of the two. Separation, when we always think of the ones we love, or union, when we always forget ourselves. I don't know which of the two is sweeter. And the Vakil fell into the arms of his prince. And from that day he returned to the favor of that prince. And from that time, the Vakil offered many more years of faithful service until the end of his days. Beshno azne chon hekayat mikonad, az jodaya shekayat mikonad. Listen to the song of the reed in its weeping, for it tells the story of our separation.